Hi, this is Joe Osuna. Welcome to Inside Leisure World. Today's guest is Rondie Winkler. She is the president of the Golden Rain Foundation here in Leisure World, Seal Beach. We're going to find out more about that in a while. We're going to ask her first to tell us a little bit about herself. Let's start with when you were born. That's a good start.
Oh, the actual year?
No, not the year. Where were you born?
The year's
Never
fine.
ask a lady when they were born.
When I was born in the late 30s in the territory of Alaska, in what was then the seat of government in Juneau, the city of Juneau.
Now, why do you say it was then the seat of government?
When it was a territory, they didn't have a state government, but the federal government was seated in Juneau at that time.
Okay, and when it became a state, what happened to the seat, or the center?
The capital continued in Juneau. There was several attempts to change it to further up north towards Anchorage because that's where the major population was. However, the voters voted to move the capital, but they refused to okay the funding. And so when the funding got up into the billions, the whole thing died.
Okay. So back to when you were in Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about those early years. Your mom, your dad. You mentioned previously that they were hunters. They were hunting or hunters, or?
Well, my father and mother caught or shot almost everything protein, heavy protein like meat and fish until I was 12, 13. And part of the issues up there was food had to come up either by a barge, which sometimes took 10 days depending on the weather, or 2 weeks, or it came in by airplane. And sometimes the weather was so bad the planes didn't land for several weeks at a time, or that's probably an exaggeration, 10 days at a time. And so subsequently you filled up the freezer, and you didn't fill up your own freezer. Everybody had a locker down at the cold storage. And so it was just a cubicle like a rental locker is today, or a storage unit, and you filled it up full of meat and fish and whatever. Mostly deer. Okay,
so what kind of weapons did your mom and dad use to go after, say, animals?
I'm no expert in weapons. I know my mother's favorite gun was a 30-06.
Okay, and that's a rifle.
That's a rifle.
Okay. And did your dad also use that rifle, or others?
Oh, I'm sure he did. They had their own arsenal. It all went to my son when they passed away, and he used them. It's just a way of life. That's just what you do.
I'm envisioning a very rugged way of life where you go hunting for your food, and you have to store it because there may not be a convenient delivery of your food in time, right? Is that what I'm picturing?
In a modern sort of way. Yeah. I was talking with a classmate recently. The biggest club in the high school was the rifle club, and almost everybody that was part of that club had guns in their school lockers.
That's incredible.
And no one thought twice about it, and no one tried to shoot anybody else either, ever.
So you're saying that they had guns in their locker in high school?
At school,
but there was no violence? Nobody was shooting each other?
Never.
Wow.
Never.
Okay. That's incredible. Yeah. At my high school, yeah, we had guns, but they shot other people. Yeah. So that's the bad part.
No, it didn't happen because guns were used for subsistence.
Okay. Now, were you a shooter also?
No. Tried it once. Got knocked on my rear end and decided I didn't want to do that anymore.
Okay. How about fishing? Did you do any fishing?
Yes. My mother was very well known for her fishing abilities. I mean, people would actually want her to go with them because she knew how to fish. She took me fishing with her because she didn't want to leave me in town by myself. I had a younger brother, and so I would be sitting there reading a book, and she'd be having 3 or 4 lines out, and one would start to zing, and she'd start screaming, "Grab it, grab it, you know, you've got a fish." And I'd grab it, and you'd reel it in. It's fishing in Alaska. It's a little bit different.
Okay, and do you recall what kind of fish you were going after?
Most of the time you're going after either salmon or halibut, but there's also red snapper, black cod.
Okay. So did you learn to cook fish as well as?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
And I hate to cook fish, but yes, I learned how to cook fish.
What was your favorite fish? What did you like to eat?
One of the best kept secrets that people usually don't know about are halibut cheeks. Now, when a halibut lays flat, there's a real little place right there that's called a halibut cheek, and it's the most delicious fish there is.
I didn't know that.
Well, most people don't. You rarely see it in a restaurant. It's usually saved for people that really can appreciate good halibut.
Okay, so if I ever go to a restaurant in Alaska, maybe I'll order halibut
You can try.
cheeks
You
if they have it.
Ask if they have any halibut cheeks available.
Okay.
Every halibut has one.
Okay. But only one cheek.
Only one.
Okay. And how about in the animal kingdom, what was your favorite meat? Venison, buffalo,
No,
wolf?
no buffalo in
Okay.
Alaska.
Okay.
In southeast Alaska, it's really deer.
Deer?
Yeah. And I don't remember exactly what kind of deer, but everybody got tags. Everybody brought home their deer. And if my father went hunting and he didn't get his mom would take his tag and go pick up 2 of them.
So how did your mother get so good at hunting and fishing?
I suspect she was quite a pioneer to begin with. She went up to Alaska, I think, in her late 20s, early 30s. And the pictures that she has, she was an avid photographer. She knew how to take a car engine apart and put it together. She went here, she went there. She really did a lot of things that women didn't do back in the 20s. She was born in 1906, so you can see in the 20s she was just in 21, 22. And when she got to Alaska, it was like she was meant for that country.
Okay.
If you've seen pictures of Mount Juneau, she used to travel to the top of that mountain before she went to work at 1 o'clock. And that's a hike.
Wow.
It's almost straight up.
Now, did any part of that rub off on you?
No. Quick answer. No, it just didn't. In fact, I actually believe I personally worked hard at not letting any of it rub off on me.
Okay. So what were your days like in high school over there?
Well, keeping in mind that it doesn't get really light till about 10 o'clock in the wintertime and then gets dark about 2, 3 o'clock for a couple months out of the year. So you get up, school started at 8. You always went to school in boots once the first snows hit, and then you kept your shoes in your school locker. And you always wore warm boots. You always dressed warmly. And it was sort of like, to explain to you, you always have to worry about what the weather will bring. And if the temperatures plummeted while you were in a classroom, then you have to be warm enough to get home without getting hurt. And I always lived in town, so I could just walk to school.
Okay.
And school days were long. It was an extremely good education. And most people don't realize that when the oil was discovered and the pipeline went in, half of that money went to education. And later on, my mother was a head of the department that paid all the bills for the Department of Education. And the barges actually have to be loaded in May to get through the ice and up into the northern slope cities like Nome and Barrow to deliver the school supplies. So Alaska really concentrates on its education, and not a lot, but many young people are homeschooled because they live on islands, they live on places where there isn't any way to get a high school or a grade school close by.
Okay, so you lived in the city, Juneau.
Mm-hmm.
About what was the population like?
When I was growing up, that was probably about 8,000 people there.
Was that a big town?
Well, when you talk about Juneau, there's Juneau, then across the bridge is Douglas. And then on both sides of Juneau, you went in one direction, and that was out the road. And incidentally, if you're raised in Alaska, to get to the lower 48, you're going outside, probably because it was warmer. And then there was also an area called Thane. So it's now called the Greater Juneau Borough.
Okay.
And it's made up of Auk Bay, Juneau. It's a fairly large area.
Can you recall the worst winter you had when you were living in Alaska? Anything come to mind?
Just a lot of snow. Southeast Alaska is a rainforest. That means there's a lot of rain. One year they had close to a record of only 37 days without rain or snow. So where it really gets bad is when it snows so much, you can't get it away from the house enough to ingress and egress. You actually, in some cases, you might even have to leave the house from up, like an upstairs. Because it just, the snow gets too high.
You couldn't open your front door to get out? Is that what you're saying?
No, not if it rains 4 or 5 feet at night. I mean, if it snows, excuse me.
So you had to crawl out the window of the second floor.
Once or twice. That's rare. Don't misunderstand me.
That was one of your worst type of
and it could get very
winter.
cold.
Okay.
Down in the zeros, and the wind chill factor is high.
So that would be a winter. What were the summers like?
Rain.
Rain?
I was up at a class reunion about 20 years ago, and it was the 4th of July. It was 42 degrees outside. The rain was coming down, just a torrent. And the only way you could watch the parade, because the parade goes on no matter what, the only way you could watch it was to get on the side with your back to the rain so that you could see. It was really coming down, but it never stopped any. It doesn't stop anything in Juneau.
Everybody just continues their life with the rain.
Going.
Huh? Over here in Southern California, it's like a miracle when it's raining, everybody stops.
And it rarely floods because if you've seen Juneau, it's based on a side of a hill. Almost all the areas are just on sides of mountains, so there's no flooding.
You mentioned the time. When does it get dark? When did it get dark in the wintertime?
About 10.
At 10 o'clock at night?
And no, in the wintertime it gets dark at 10 in the morning. And again,
10 in the morning?
Okay, I'm got it backwards. It gets light at 10 in the morning.
Okay.
It gets dark at 3:30 in the afternoon.
Wow, and that's winter.
Yeah, and in the summer, I have pictures I've taken at 1 in the morning that it just looks, a little dusky, a little like it's starting to get dark, but it never really gets dark.
I remember a 4th of July in Ketchikan, and the fireworks didn't start until about 10 o'clock at night, because it was not dark enough. So about 10 o'clock at night is when they started them.
And it probably still wasn't quite dark
yes,
enough.
Right.
Now, up in Juneau, they have the fireworks are all on barges out in the channel.
Okay.
And so it's fun to sit on the shore and just watch fireworks.
So we were talking about Alaska and the extremes in Alaska. Okay. And now what part of the world did you come to after Alaska?
Well, actually, I ran away from home.
Ooh.
And,
well, you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to.
No, I can talk about it. Got in a plane and came down here to El Monte and Monterey Park. And my future mother-in-law changed the date on my birth certificate because I was only 17. And we got married. And my husband was in the Coast Guard. He was on the Storis, the icebreaker Storis in Juneau. And then he was on the 40-footers in San Francisco Bay. So after we got married, we went up to San Francisco. When he got out, we came back down here because he had a job at Continental Can Company waiting for him.
Okay.
So we
Why
ended up
did the birth certificate have to be changed?
Because I was only 17, and you
what
couldn't
does
get
that
married
mean?
till you're 18.
Oh, you couldn't get married until you were 18?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I went until I was almost 30, a year older than I really was.
Oh, okay. So have you changed your certificate back yet, or is it still the same?
No, it's all right. I have the official one now.
Oh, okay. All right, so we're back to the regular age.
Yeah, now we're back to the regular age. I can't believe how old I am, but yes, I'm back to the regular age.
Okay. How did you get over to Leisure World? What were the circumstances, or what did you like about Leisure World that you came to live in Leisure World?
Well, my first husband had passed away, and then when I remarried, that husband passed away. So I was living up in Hacienda Heights, and I wanted to move down in closer to Long Beach because that's where my daughter was. And she had just had triplets. So I moved to Signal Hill. And quickly I ended up being the de facto manager of an HOA, and I wasn't a happy camper, so I started to look to where I could move to, and I started looking in Leisure World. And the first couple units they showed me were basic units, and I thought, no, this isn't going to work. Came back and looked again, still wasn't going to work, and then a realtor took me to a unit that had just been remodeled, and I said, oh, I can do this. So I was in a pretty good position financially. So I bought the unit, gutted it down to the plumbing and the wires and rebuild it.
Okay. And
It's one of the things you can do in Leisure World.
that's right. And once you do that, it's just like a modern
That's right.
unit.
Earthquake retrofitted, it's up to code, everything.
How long have you been living here in Leisure World?
I purchased my unit in 2005. I moved in 9 months later in 2006, and I've been, of course, here ever since. Love living here.
Okay.
Love living here.
Okay, we're going to be talking about you as the president of the Golden Rain Foundation. But before you got there, how did you get into the politics of stepping up to that position?
It's very easy to get involved. To me, I was protecting my asset. I wanted to know what was going on. So, this is an asset. My unit is an asset. And so I started attending the mutual board meetings inside Leisure World. We call them mutuals. They're just the same as any corporation that manages property and buildings. Mm-hmm. Some of them are as small as 60 units. Some are as large, I think 874, 78, somewhere along there. But my mutual is fairly small. It's only has 276 units. And I just started going to board meetings. And because I attended regularly and I always had something to say, you can see that, pretty soon they asked me to be an advisor. Then they asked me to fill in for a slot. Then they asked me if I'd run for an office, and I did, and then the next thing I knew, I was president.
Okay. Now, what does the president do, or what are your duties, and what is the GRF? Can you explain what that is, or Golden Rain Foundation?
GRF is the Golden Rain Foundation.
Okay.
It really has two purposes. The first one, it is the trustee of all the buildings, all the common area buildings. This would be 6 clubhouses, the administration building, the security building. I mean, the list is endless. In fact, if you can determine what a building is, there's somewhere between 21 and 26 buildings. You may not think some are an actual building. And it manages and keeps those in good repair. It takes care of all the amenities, the recreation. Last I heard, we were almost over 250 clubs that operate inside Leisure World. We schedule those. They have clubhouses to use, places to go. The Video Producers Club is another one that's inside there. And we have a budget of over $11 million a year just for the operation. And the corporation itself, not counting the current value of the buildings, is around $20 million. Remember, we have to go by the original value. And they employ over 200 people. Some are part-time in particular. So it's an ideal place for somebody that's retired that, let's say, they just want to work part-time. And so they can work 20, 25 hours a week working in there. And they're just very busy. Now, the other half of what the foundation does, it provides the services to the 16 mutuals. We do their building repairs, we do the building inspections. It's one of the reasons why our 60-year-old buildings do as well as they do, because we're constantly keeping them up to date and repairing them. And people remodel them, and when they remodel them, they bring them up to code and everything. And we also, I'm trying to think of everything we do in that respect. Mostly service maintenance, the physical property department, security. We have a security department, and we check people in through our gates. They don't come in easily. You need a pass, or you need a sticker on your car, or somebody has to call you in. So to some degree, we can control the access to our population, which makes it a very safe place to live. We also maintain over 6 miles of roads. Mm-hmm. No one knows how many miles of sidewalks in addition to that. We have a pool, a golf course that we have to keep up. We do all our own sewer maintenance. We do all our own storm drain maintenance. We take a considerable financial burden off of the city of Seal Beach and just what we accomplish inside our walls. We have 4 miles of walls we have to maintain.
What's the population of Leisure World?
There's 6,608 units. We estimate, based on census and everything, there's probably between 8,000 and 9,000 people there.
The maintenance department, like, what do they cover in Leisure World?
Well, it depends on what your problem is.
Okay.
They would fix your
Generally,
plumbing. I
okay.
could give you an ideal situation. I was taking a shower one Sunday morning at 7 o'clock, and all of a sudden something was coming through the drain that I didn't particularly want to be stepping in. So I rinsed my hair off. I called security because it was a Sunday and service maintenance wasn't open. They had somebody knocking at my door before I could even get dressed. And he came in and he fixed the problem. That's not untypical. We have plumbers, we have electricians. What is the problem? We're there to fix it. Sometimes we have to replace things. You know, a counter is finally worn out and we'll replace it. Or another place is the state law says that all our toilets have to be 1.6 gallons. And almost all the mutuals have totally replaced all their toilets and their plumbing in there. So it's a constantly growing entity just to keep up with the laws, to keep up with the buildings. They're very busy.
I guess what I was getting at is Leisure World maintains the units for the residents, right?
For the mutuals.
For the mutuals.
Yes, the residents don't own their own unit. They own a share of stock and they sign an occupancy agreement that entitles them to that unit. And if at one time the unit needs to be sold, whatever it sells for, you know, less the accompanying fees, is theirs.
Okay. What are some interesting challenges or things that the GRF is going to be getting into or looking at that you think they might do or of interest?
Well, that's a good question. There's always things going on that are a little bit of a challenge. Right now we're trying to work out our traffic enforcement. It's a somewhat controversial issue. Do you fine, don't you fine? How much, when and where, and for what rule infractions, what traffic rule infractions. That's a very difficult one we're trying to solve. We've been taking a couple years trying to do it because it is very controversial. The other one is the upkeep of the buildings. We're also changing things around in administration to make it easier and easier access. One of the challenges we gave our executive director, Randy Ankeny, was succession planning. So every single manager has a successor sort of in line. That doesn't necessarily mean that person will get the job, but it means if for some reason that person no longer is there, we have somebody that can fill the position.
Okay.
And that is, so we've had to come up with a couple extra office spaces to do it.
You mentioned all these things that GRF does or is responsible for. What amenities do we have in Leisure World that GRF oversees? Like swimming pools or golf courses?
Yeah, there's no charges for the swimming pool, the golf courses. We have a fabulous exercise room that was just totally re-equipped with all new equipment. This would be the envy of some of the fitness clubs or whatever around. And so subsequently that's there. We have recently I was told there's over 60 people at a line dancing class. What do you want to do? Do you want to sing? Do you want to dance? We do it all. Every Saturday night there's dances with a live band. I could go on and on. There are some other advantages that I think are important as you age, because I truly feel Leisure World is a place where you can age in place longer. You may be able to stay in place another 5 to 10 years living there. Not because we assist, you know, you get assisted living, although you can hire that to be done, but just because our curbs are round, our streets are relatively safe. You can go walking at 10 o'clock at night, and except for maybe the recent coyote issue, you can feel pretty safe. But we have a 24-hour nurse. So being single and laying in bed at 2 o'clock in the morning, feeling absolutely miserable and sick, and you don't know whether you should call for an ambulance or not, you can make a phone call for the 24-hour nurse. She'll be there usually within 10, 15 minutes, decide whether you really need serious help, or she can help you with a shot or something that needs to be done. It's a marvelous benefit.
Also, we have what, 2 ambulances that are stationed?
We have 2 ambulances that are on site at all times. They're care ambulances, but they're available if you need them quickly. And they're there. And we also have an access bus. So if for some reason we have a healthcare center, I should have mentioned that because it's an important part of what we have available. But if you need to go up to a specialist other than the ones that come into the healthcare center up at Los Alamitos, the access bus goes up and back a number of times every day. We also, with the help of the City of Seal Beach, we have a bus that takes some of our residents up to the grocery stores, which is it's popular. I mean, and we do our best. There comes a time when you can't drive anymore. Leisure World with its bus system is pretty set up for you to, again, be pretty mobile without actually having to drive.
Okay. Now back to the GRF. Do you attend committee meetings? Are there committee meetings? Is it just a board just meeting once a month? Is there some time involved in doing this type of business?
That's sort of an understatement. The foundation board of directors is made up of 18 people. Because of the high density, the number of units in 2 of the mutuals, they have 2 representatives on the board. And they meet once a month. And underneath that board of directors are 8 committees, standing committees. Executive committee, finance committee, probably could name them, it'll take a minute. Communications, security, they all meet and discuss some of the issues that the membership brings to us and we feel we have to do. They also are the ones that do the initial approving of their own cost centers on the budget. We just got through doing the budgets, and thanks to our treasurer, Linda Stone, our budget has now been put to bed, and it's a good feeling. However, they meet just to solve those. We have a library committee, security, I can go over them, but it takes a minute. Recreation, which is a very important committee because they're the ones that determine what is happening in the clubhouses.
Okay. So it sounds like it's a very time-consuming position to be a Golden Rain Foundation director.
It can be.
It can?
You know, if you're really doing your job, you're going to want to be at most of the committee meetings. Out of those 18 directors, probably average attendance at a committee of directors is 12 to 14 people.
Okay. Something unique that you mentioned about the ladies being in charge of the GRF. What's that about?
I need to be careful here. For the first time in a number of years, 4 women are corporate officers. And for those of us that sort of broke a crack in making cracks in the glass ceiling, there's a little bit of pride in that.
Very good. That's a good accomplishment. Okay, now we're got to wrap it up. Fortunately, we're out of time.
See, it went quickly.
Anything you want to say real fast in closing?
Leisure World is a great place to live, and I'm so proud and pleased to live there.
Okay, and it's in good leadership hands right now because Rhonda Winkler is the president of the GRF.
Thank you.
Yeah. And she's got help with 3 other ladies.
Yes, 3 other women that do a fabulous job.
Thank you.